how it works, I mean, technologically speaking, my colleagues are much better at explaining that. But where did I come into this? Well, I was one of 1,800 Wrens who were drafted in to operate these machines. But initially, because we had to sign the Official Secrets Act, and we had to say we must never talk about anything we saw, or anything we heard, or anything we did, we were not given very much information. And in fact, the reason why this was kept a secret right through the war, this whole operation, was because each of the various people who sections were working, they were only told like a little bit of the jigsaw. And so I have to say that although I was in the Wrens from 1944 to the end of 46, I never heard the word enigma. And so I didn't really know what I was doing. I still don't know, but still. Anyway, so here we were faced with this amazing machine. And I didn't realize at the time, these drums, for instance, there are, as we've been told, 3 banks of drums. Obviously, each bank would have a different color code, and they would be chosen according to the menu that you've been shown here. Each day at midnight, the setup was changed. So even if you would break in on a Monday, you'd have start again midnight on Tuesday. And what we were given was a little piece of paper which would say maroon, brown, green, for example. Now, we didn't realize, certainly I didn't, that each of these 3 drums equates to the 3 wheels called rotors, which are set up on the Enigma machine. And again, it would tell you 3, 2, and 4. 3, 2, and 4. So because of the changes, we didn't want to make any mistakes. We color-coded them. So this might be wheel 3, wheel 2, and wheel 4 on the Enigma machine. And so we would be given a piece of paper with 3 different wheel orders to run. Different numbers on the top, different in the middle, and different at the bottom. Now, each of these equates to an Enigma rotor, and if I can get the little thingy off there. Here we've got one. Inside it, there are 4 rows of little wire brushes. Each brush has 19 bits of wire in it, which makes an awful lot of wires that mustn't touch each other, although we didn't know why. In an Enigma machine, there are 3 rotors on a 3-wheel Enigma, and when they're dropped into the Enigma machine, one of the rotors has got little wire brushes, hence the little wire brushes, which are replicated. And on the other side of each rotor, there are little metal studs or commutators. Here we've got the little metal studs. So if you put the wheel and push it in, the brushes should touch the metal studs, and that is the facsimile of the Enigma machine. Okay, so we were given a piece of paper with the wheel orders, and also, as John explained, before those rotors are popped into an Enigma machine, you've got a little alphabet ring, and each day you can choose which letter of the alphabet ring, and that would be explained in this middle column here. The top one says 2494, which means the 24th letter on this row, number 9 and number 4, roughly speaking. So that would be indicated on these 3 little wheels, although everything would start with Z. These 3 would start with Z, all these would start with Z. The middle row would also be put in at Z, because you have to begin somewhere. Where you're going to begin. And here we've got a fascinating thing called the menu. I will say that the menu has lots of lines and lots of letters, right? What does that tell us? Well, we didn't really know, but we knew what to do about it. There are big black letters and little red ones. So here we've got big black letters, and joined up, big black letters, little red letters. Right. So the big black letters are the big problem, because on an Enigma machine, the different permutations where you can pop the rotors in is 17,576. But when the Germans modified it to make it more difficult, at the bottom of the Enigma machine they put a plug board in, 26 letters. And what they would do, according to this yellow thing, which you can all come and have a look later on if you feel like it, if I haven't thoroughly confused you by then. Here we've got the equivalent of the plug board. You join one letter to another letter, and that's what this menu was telling us. It would say, oh, okay, let's join G to R. There were reasons for that, which you can also ask the technicians about later on. So we would pop round the back of the machine and join G to R without knowing that that was the stecker board, because as you've been told, it's 100 and forget about 17,500. This takes you up to your 159 million. So the most important thing was to find out at least one of those connections. It might be connect A to Z, connect G to R. And because it was so complicated, there were always two of us on each bomb, which meant 8 of us on each bomb. And there were over 200 bombs, so there were a lot of us. The reason for 8 is because these things had to go 24/7. And so you had to have 2 of us on the day, 8 to 4, 2 of us taking over from 4 to midnight, another 2 of us taking over from midnight to 8, and 2 of us going home to sleep it off. So, because, if you change your working day every week, you get a bit out of sync by the time you get to the midnight to 8. So that's why we had the 4.5 days off at the end of it all. So here we are, we've gone around the back and we've joined all the plug board letters together. We go round the front and we put the wheels on. And this one will tell us ZZA, ZZL, ZZP, and so on. And we put them all on. You didn't have to be a rocket scientist, but you did have to be really, really accurate, because every one of these little brushes, right, there are 4 rows of 26. They had to touch exactly when you put them on here and click them in. Because if you turned them, you didn't put them on exactly, or if you managed to turn it the wrong way, you would cause what was known as a short circuit. Short circuit, very dirty word. You could get really into trouble. All these really clever people working out all this menu, and silly me, I would cause a short circuit. We might lose the possibility of bringing up a job, as we call it. So that had to be very carefully done. And there were 2 of you checking the back. The front was not so difficult. So there you are, and you'd set it in motion, and round it will go. And when we turn it on later, you will notice you won't be able to read the letters on the top row because they go round too quickly. In milliseconds, all of these wires are going from A to Z in 4 rows. When it's gone round from A to Z, you will hear the machine going click, click, click. In my dreams, we used to hear this. You know, the first couple of weeks when you went to bed, click, click. But the point is that the time between each click, this will have gone around from A to Z. So it's really very fast. Then this will go from A to B. And when this has done its tour of duty all the way from A to Z, this one will go from A to B. So that will have gone through the 17,576 possibilities on this one particular menu. And then you go on to the next wheel order. So you're always very busy because it wasn't just a matter of turning it on. We had, and you won't see, it's not very important, but just to give you an idea, we had a little worksheet, a job sheet, and as the machine was clicking round, you had to fill in what had happened in the last run. Each run took about 15 minutes. They wanted to know when you started, what wheel orders, what came out of the letterbox, which I haven't mentioned, and any remarks, like, I hate this menu. So anyway, the machine would stop. If it found a correlation between all the goings-on inside there and this menu. So anyway, it would stop. So what would that tell us? Well, we've got the little letterbox around the side with a little relay. There are 3 sets of alphabets in that little letterbox, one for each bank of wheels. And let us say the little relay came down on a certain letter of the alphabet in the middle. So we'd know we were looking for a wheel order, maroon, brown, green. So we would write that down, MBG. We would then go to this set of wheels, which don't match, the gold and black. And that would tell us the probable alphabet ring that the Germans had taken before they dropped their little rotors into their machine. They would twiddle the alphabet ring round, and that would tell us possibly what the alphabet ring was set to. Okay, we'll write that down, run round the side and write down the relay, say it was Z. And that would tell exactly the first set of these wheels, here we are, how the first lot had been plugged in. Thank you very much. So we would then write that down on a piece of paper and give it to the checker. Now, if you go round the back later on, you'll see a checking machine, completely different machine. We had to learn to operate both of them. And we would have this wonderful menu, and we would start checking. We would press, there's a letter around the alphabet letterbox. We would press that to see if we could find the answer to one of these. In this menu, it's G, for various technical reasons. It's okay, we'd write down everything. We'd go around the menu. You can actually, it's a hands-on. You can press the button and see what's coming up. So we would write down all the answers. Now, as you've been told, the Enigma couldn't encrypt its own letter. So if we pressed an A, and an A came up on the lamp board on the checking machine, no good, forget about it, can't happen. But if we pressed, for instance, an E, and it came out as a G, and later on, as we were pressing G, it came out as an E, that was confirmation. That's good news. Confirmation. No self-couples, but definitely a confirmation. And if we had enough of those, we would then phone it through to Bletchley, not knowing anything except the word Bletchley. Because by the time I joined up, there were so many of these bombs, they couldn't possibly be housed here in Bletchley. So they put them into outstations, Eastcote and Stanmore, and various others. So those were the main ones. So we had a little red telephone. And what we would do, having checked the stop, as we called it, we would pick it up, but we couldn't say anything which might be hacked into. So we had a kind of a code ourselves. This machine is called Phoenix, right? In Eastcote, for example, there were over 100 of these, and they were put into different bays, about 12 in each bay, all clicking around. And we would have a name for the bay. For instance, they were all called by various countries that had been overrun. One of them I worked in was called Norway. So every machine would have the name of a town in Norway. So then we could say, and what we did say, more or less, certainly I did, we'd pick up this red voice scrambling telephone and we would say, "This is Norway checker. I have a good stop for you on Stavanger." That would be the name of your machine. It could be anything, Røros, whatever. And then we would talk about it. We would simply say maroon, brown, green, apple butter, Charlie, or whatever, ABC, yeah? And we would tell them the little answer to the first set of plugs, say B. Okay, and they would say thank you, and you'd put the phone down. What they would then do is, say in Hut 6, which was the Army and Navy coding, they would have not only a few liberated Enigma machines, but we had something called Type X, and that's our own coding machine. There's one out there at the back, you can have a look, and that could be set up to emulate an Enigma machine, and they would put those wheels on, 3, 2, 1, whatever they were, maroon, brown, green. We didn't know that these were called by numbers. We only knew they were called by colours. And they would set it up, and they would then press the gobbledygook, and if it came out in clear German, that was job up. They would ring back to your chief petty officer and say, job up, and she would tell us, job up, strip, meaning pull out all the wheels, pull out all the plugs, and start again with a new menu. And that's how it went on 24/7. It was quite arduous because, as you can imagine, these bays full of these machines were custom built with very, very high walls and barbed wire sticking outwards, all the rest of it. You could only go in through 2 Marine soldiers with guns and looking very fierce. So you did have little slit windows right at the top, so you knew whether it was day or night, but not much else. And so that was how it worked, and you change watches, and that was it really. Went on 24/7. Now after the war, Churchill ordered all these to be demolished, although we don't know 100%, but it is said that he had a lot of people he didn't trust who were supposed to be allies or colonials, we don't know, but they had enigmas they didn't know we could break, and so quite a lot of information came, and that was really very useful. So instead of being a bomb operator, I became a bomb destroyer, if you like, and I had, and many of us did this, we had soldering irons, and we had to unsolder the 12 miles of wire from their little contacts, and they went into cardboard boxes, and eventually maybe they were sold as army surplus or thrown down an open cast mine, and we don't know. They all more or less, as John explained, disappeared, and we were all given new jobs, and on my demob sheet it said I've worked as a shorthand typist. This is a bit of a joke because I can't type very well. However, that was me till now demobbed. And because we had signed the Official Secrets Act, that was the end of the story for a long, long time. Now, they brought a book out after the security blanket was lifted, a man called Fred Winterbottom, who had worked here in the war, he brought out a book called The Ultra Secret. There wasn't very much in it, and I thought, oh, I did something a little bit interesting, not much about the bombs. My husband, who was in the civil service, he was very much involved with much more important things, like the Concorde, going to various places. So he was, I thought, I'll impress him, you know. And I said, oh, this is German codes. I was involved in breaking German codes during the war. And he said, oh, that's very interesting, dear. And what's for tea? So it was a bit of a non-event. That was the end of it. But funnily enough, at the earlier part of our marriage, we took a franchise on a Bendix laundrette. So I found myself managing this laundrette, and there were 12 machines with all the drums going round and round, and so home from home. And that was the end of this. And of course, about 27 years ago, you may or may not be aware, they tried to pull this place down. And the trust got together, and finally, and with this brilliant bomb, which is the only one in the world actually at this moment, which is in working order, we're all up and running. So that's my bit of the story. I hope I haven't bored you too much. And thank you for listening. We're going to turn it on.